Home, President Netanyahu is facing mounting pressure from within his own cabinet, from the Israeli public and from the relatives of the hostages who over the weekend stormed a parliamentary session in Jerusalem to demand more action to secure the release of their loved ones. Well, let's get more. Let's go to Doha and talk to Nawaf Al-Thani, who is a Qatari former Director of Defence Intelligence Operations and Defence Attaché to the United States. Thank you so much for being here with us. What are you hearing about the framework of some sort of New Deal?
Thank you for having me. Well, Matthew, first of all, there are two parts for this. The first is the Qatari statements in the past days and weeks that they've continued their efforts to restart negotiations, and they haven't stopped in their efforts. But the second part of this is also, at least from the Qatari perspective, they play it very close to the vest when it comes to negotiations. It's very sensitive, and they don't talk a lot about it before it happens. But all reports indicate that we're heading towards, if everything works out well, to probable negotiations restarting.
The week started with that Axios report in the United States suggesting the possibility of a 2-month ceasefire, a phased return and release of the hostages, exchanges. Are those the sorts of details you're hearing?
Those are some of the details I'm hearing. Obviously, these things are very fluid and will change, as we've seen in past negotiations in this current crisis, have changed during negotiations. So I wouldn't take anything, as official until the negotiations actually reach a critical point where they can execute. But obviously, this will depend on all partners to remain steadfast in their commitment. And unfortunately, we've seen these things break down in the past because of internal and external political effects on the parties.
Sure. What do you, because I know that you keep such a close eye on this, what do you think are probably the biggest obstacles at the moment?
Well, the biggest obstacle it seems right now is the Israeli position that the military operations should continue while negotiations, whatever the outcome may be, simultaneously with whatever the outcome of the negotiations. I don't think that would work. They tried it in the past, obviously, and it hasn't come up with the results they want. Unfortunately, things like the tapes that were leaked for Netanyahu criticizing Qatar, while Qatar actually having a positive effect, gives a behind the veil or behind the scenes indication of how the regime or the government of Netanyahu views this, which is unfortunately not encouraging for a positive outcome. Nonetheless, the Israelis and the Americans and obviously Hamas have committed in the past, and the Qataris continue to commit to more negotiations, and we'll see where this goes. But it is more encouraging than where we were a few days ago.
It is, and all the signposting seems to suggest that we know this meeting is actually happening. Another of the suggestions is apparently that the Hamas leaders leave Gaza. Is that likely to be in the mix here, and how problematic is that?
Well, it is quite problematic because, first of all, the Israelis' understanding of who is Hamas changes day by day. The other issue, obviously, is the Qatari position as a negotiator views that any internal issue in Gaza should be for the Palestinians and not an external party. But obviously, any negotiation has to lead to humanitarian aid and a release of hostages. That should be paramount. Burdening the negotiations with more than it can take will only lead to its failure.
A final question then, because one thing we've not talked about here, and I recognise that everything is pretty fluid at the moment as these discussions go on, but what sort of numbers of Palestinian prisoners in exchange are we likely to be talking about? And your assessment too on how close or how far away you think we are from some sort of deal?
Well, it's very difficult, obviously, as you stated, Matthew, to give a number. At this point, it's too early and it's very fluid, as you said. However, looking at the possibility of a deal, I think the very limited humanitarian deal that happened a few days ago, just over a week ago, with the French and the Qataris mediating to bring in medicine to the hostages, bringing some aid to the Palestinians, was an indication that there is that possibility to move forward in negotiation. That was very encouraging, as limited as it was. And I think there is a possibility and a window. All it needs is willingness from the parties. And we have seen some willingness, and hopefully this moves forward more positively in the future.
Well, we shall see what comes out of this meeting in the coming days. Nawaf Al Thani, thank you so much once again for joining us here on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.